So I have the honor of introducing Eric Durak. Eric, his company is the Medical Health and Fitness Products. He has health education products, including cancer wellness, exercise medicine, insurance billing for fitness, and introducing wellness at home, wellness education for home health care. Eric works at UC Santa Barbara, as well as the Injury Prevention Program, developing wellness programs to reduce severity and total number of injuries within the university setting. His goal is to improve productivity and reduce workers' comp costs at the entire UC system. Eric has been involved in health promotion for over 20 years and have worked in the medical research, publishing, speaking, and production during this entire time. He is the specialties involved with writing, production, marketing, and research, and he's consulted with many, many healthcare organizations and corporate entities, guiding and educating on insight, research for health enhancement and product development. Currently, he is the president of the Medical Health and Fitness Association. So here we go. Let's roll the stage. Come down, Eric.
Thank you. So, I've given versions of this lecture for many years. Christopher asked me, I don't know, back in 2006, 2007, and I think I'm doing such a good job that this year he gave me a partner. So Rhonda Gates and I are gonna tackle this issue together. And I have 20 minutes. I'm going to hit my stopwatch right now, and I'm going to make sure that I stay on my time frame. And what I would like to do with this lecture is to I have two gee golly whiz things here that I want you guys to walk out with. And as we go through the slides, I'll point them out to you. You know, we may be in what could be considered the best of times or the worst of times in terms of our current state of farming, food production, distribution, etc. But I found a quote here that I wanted to lead off with, and it's from Wendell Berry, and he says, you know, people are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and they're treated by a health industry which pays no attention to food. And I think that he really knocked the ball right out of the park in terms of this statement. When I do give information, I like to talk about some things that are new and interesting in the field. And in nutrition, I came across a few weeks ago when I was going through my research, what are some of the high points. And one of them was interesting, that people who take vitamin supplements may lead healthier lives. And again, this may be a chicken or the egg phenomenon, but at least someone is sort of looking at that. You know, do healthier people take vitamins, or do people who take vitamins lead healthier lives? I'm not sure. Vitamin C may help reduce the risk of strokes. The benefits of curcumin in cancer treatment, and of course, could vitamin D help prevent certain types of cancers? Vitamin D is one of the gee golly whiz things I'm going to talk about here in a couple slides. I'm going to go back to one of my original statements. I've actually had this slide in a few of my medical nutrition talks here at MWA. And so I want to actually sort of define what medical nutrition may actually be. And one of the things is that medical nutrition may be the use of specific foods to improve the body's homeostasis. Well, that kind of makes sense. You know, that's a fairly logical type statement. The next thing is that maybe the addition or the deletion of certain types of foods to treat or assist in ameliorating the disease process. So I think one thing that would come to mind is for diabetes, you might want to reduce certain types of foods. But after listening to one of our speakers this morning, I'm not going to say cutting out sugars, because it may not be that simple. But the use of food specifically before or after a medical procedure. And anyone who's ever had a medical procedure may have had a conversation with their doctor about not eating 24 hours before, or not eating certain types of foods. And lastly, it maybe is a lifestyle pattern of eating that helps reduce the risk of a specific disease that's development based on familiar or other lifestyle habits. And I really think that last description is something that I think may be one of the better things in terms of defining medical nutrition, because that's something we have to live with every day. Is a new food pyramid make sense? Well, if someone's a vegan or a vegetarian, they look at that and say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm not here to say that a vegan or other types of vegetarians is the way to eat. I want to talk a little bit more about sort of what's happening globally in the food supply, and then come back and look at this under a different light. Well, how many medical institutions actually look at nutrition as something that is part of their curriculum and part of what they actually promote? Well, if you went to a cafeteria in many hospitals around the United States today, you would find that the foods that they are feeding both their patients and their guests are the same things that you would find maybe like in the hospital or the cafeteria right down the hallway here. They've got the coffee, they've got the baked goods, they've got the sweets, they've got basically the non-nutritious foods. And even the American Cancer Society, I gave a lecture in one of my areas, cancer, and I was telling my audience that on the American Cancer Society's website at that time, they were actually promoting the use of margarines and high-fat foods and milkshakes and things so cancer patients could maintain calories during and after their chemotherapy. And for most people who have a progressive thought in terms of nutrition and cancer care, they would look at that and say they're completely off the mark. But to be fair, there are some medical centers who are pretty progressive in their approach. The Mayo Clinic Nutrition Center, the UCLA Geffen Center for Human Nutrition, and University of Maryland St. Joseph Medical Nutrition Center are three shining examples, and I could have listed 50 more because there are a number of hospitals around the United States that are promoting nutrition research, better eating habits, and everything from agriculture to farming practices in their curriculums. So one of the gee golly whiz things that I want to talk about that I hope that you would leave with and say, well, what did Eric talk about that's interesting? Are there a couple things that I can walk away with? And over the last 2 or 3 years, my research, especially in the area of cancer care, is that vitamin D is a tremendous both vitamin and hormone. And Heidi will probably tell you that she got a lot of vitamin D yesterday at the beach. So it's not in a lot of foods, but it is actually fortified and it is used as a supplement. And one study that I came across, the VITAL study, was looking at the combination of vitamin D and omega-3 to lower the risk for cancer, heart disease, and stroke. And a lot of the research that's been done has not been looking at the advancement of supplementation, but looking at folks who are actually having low vitamin D levels, which is quite a few people, and especially in the wintertime. So low vitamin D is actually associated with a higher risk of bone fractures, low immunity function, and may increase colds and flu. So we see a strong association between the lack of vitamin D and certain types of either acute or chronic illnesses. And as vitamin C gets more and more popular in the literature and in the media, there are some studies that refute the benefits that says, you know, future studies are likely to be actually futile, that vitamin D actually has no benefits whatsoever. Michael Hollick, who is a professor at Boston University, states that most of these studies in and of themselves might be flawed. So you can see that there is something that's bringing vitamin D to the forefront is that everyone's arguing about everything. So if there wasn't anything to it, no one would be talking about it. But people on both sides are. So there are a lot of politics going on these days, and I don't think it's going to be over anytime soon. But one of the things that I have seen, and I'll preface this by saying not only did I study nutrition in school and have done a lot of research in the area, I've worked in my career as a consultant to certain sports nutrition companies. I grew up on a farm in mid-Michigan and watched my parents and my grandparents planting the fields and all these kind of things. And one of the things that I see that is probably the bane of our existence right now in this country is the overuse of pesticides and GMOs, which I consider could be an end game to the food industry in general. So some of you may be familiar with Michael Pollan and his films, his books like The Omnivore's Dilemma and his documentary on Food Inc. and what they're really talking about in terms of the agriculture industry, and that the foods that we eating are solely dependent on how these foods are produced in the first place. Michael Pollan has a really nice clip on YouTube. It's about a 3 or 4 minute videotape or video, and he states, well, how can buying a bunch of carrots in the store cost the consumer more than buying Twinkies? because Twinkies have to be manufactured. They're manufactured in a plant. They have to have wrapping and processing, all the other things that go into all of these ingredients. And carrots you pull up from the ground. So where's the disconnect here that a bunch of carrots cost you more to buy in a store than buying a box of Twinkies? And he's really saying that because of subsidies and all of the other politics that go into this, it's easier to produce boxed foods than it is to produce and sell natural products. And one of the other gee golly whiz things that I talk about here, and I know Christopher even mentioned that it's one of these busy slides, but it's a good busy slide. I came across an institute here called the Cornucopia Institute, and they're actually doing research in the area of natural foods and food production. So I want you guys to just take this in, breathe it in right now. And I'm going to show you a couple of things here. There are a number of organic grocery stores and organic farms and organic companies in the U.S. today. But what most people are not familiar with is that many of these organic food companies are being bought up by the big boys. And I'm looking at companies here like Cargill. I'm looking at Kellogg's. I'm looking at Pepsi. I'm looking at Coca-Cola and Nestle. I'm actually looking down here at Coors Brewery Company. So there's a couple organic food stores right now that are being purchased by a beer company. That tells you something right there. I found it interesting because I'm not familiar with organic food stores. I know that Whole Foods is one of the big names. I know that Trader Joe's has got a national presence and they have a lot of organic foods. But I'm actually looking at what's happening here, that some of the big biotech companies and some of the big retail consumer food groups are actually buying into the organics. Now, are they doing it to make these things better because of consumer demand, or are they doing it to make some of their products that are supposed to be organic, non-organic? And I think there's a combination of both of those going on. So you guys can look at it if you want, and I will, like Jason Conviser said, that if anybody wants a copy of the PowerPoint, let me know, and I can email it to you after today's lecture. I find this thing fascinating. I've looked at this thing 3 or 4 times, and I found, oh, look at this other, Foster Farms, and you know, it's amazing to me what's going on in terms of, you know, I'm not going to say corporate rating, but the corporate buy-in to the organics movement. Like I say, it may be great or it may be devastating, yet to be determined. Well, historically, doctors looked at things segmentally, and I've heard some talk about this today. If you went to a cardiologist, that cardiologist would say, well, no more saturated fats, no more trans fats. If you went to a gastroenterologist, they may talk about fiber. If you went to a nephrologist, they may talk about sodium for your hypertension. If you went to a diabetologist or an internal medicine doc, they may emphasize against sugar or starches, etc. So David Katz, well-known nutrition physician in the United States, in a recent article in the Huffington Post, said that it is called a one nutrient at a time approach to nutrition counseling. And he says that instead of seeing the whole picture of soil science and organics and food distribution and packaging and additives and corporate farming and all of this stuff, doctors are looking at one nutrient at a time to try to fix a larger problem. But to give them credit, there are some doctors in the United States that are looking at this issue. And I've spoken about this in some of my other talks. More pharmaceuticals and more pharmacies are actually selling vitamins. More doctors are prescribing vitamins to their patients. There's a medical food company that I know of, because a colleague of mine works there, called Primus. They call themselves Primus Pharmaceuticals, but they actually sell products that are botanically based for specific medical conditions. And they are a very fast-growing company, and they consider themselves to be a pharmaceutical company. They have shareholders, they sell stock, everything. And then one of the more important certifications that I've seen in the industry is the Institute for Integrative Medicine, which on its board and many of their instructors are themselves physicians and well-known PhDs. Andrew Weil, some of those folks who are on their board. Well, the people's response to this issue is very interesting as well, because I go to Detroit every summer to visit family, and when we go to Trader Joe's, which is right in Detroit now, you see lots of organic foods. And when I grew up, there were no organic foods in the grocery stores. They were in my backyard. So one of the other things is home, gardening, urban gardening now in major cities. And that's sort of catching fire on some of the social media websites. There's more farmers markets. I mean, I live in Southern California. We have farmers markets almost every day in our town. Trader Joe's, I think, has a higher presence. And as I write down there, grocery stores are in many cases equaling better quality, whereas some of the food in fast food restaurants, their quality is still not that great. They haven't made that leap yet. Some of them are, but I still think they have a long way to go when you compare them to the grocery stores. Well, has anything changed in 40 years? When I was in college, I had the opportunity to read about 25 years worth of Prevention magazine, and I've saved a few issues. And this is a 1968 article right here, Can Diet Help a Diabetic? And this is a 1970 issue of Nutrition Today, which talks about nutrition for cancer survivors. So they've been grappling with these issues for many years, and I think that in some respects, some of the answers have been around for a while. People either haven't looked at it or they haven't paid that much attention. And I also like to look at the nutrition pioneers like Jack LaLanne and J.I. Rodale, who in 1936, before Prevention magazine came into being, he actually promoted his newsletter, and he wanted to promote bone meal for bone health. So Jason Kunweiser, I think Rodale was one of the first guys that was looking into osteoporosis. Paul and Patricia Bragg, who, for those of you that buy Bragg liquid aminos, that's been on the market for 2 generations now. And I also included Jane Brody, who, although she's not, medical doctor or whatever, if you look at the body of work that she's put across in the New York Times and all the books that she's written on recipes and such, she's really been the voice of nutrition in the United States for many people, especially women, for the past 40 or 50 years. And when I put this slide together, I said, she is really a very important voice. And a lot of people might not, in this room, might not think of her as such, but if you ask a lot of consumers, they would say so. There are a lot of books on the issue, not just nutrition therapy. If you wanted to buy this book here, it cost you $175, but you'd probably buy it for a class in a medical school. But The Alphabet for Good Health in a Sick World, Chef MD John LaPuma, who's actually spoken at this forum a couple years ago, nutritional supplements from A to Z from my friend Joe Cannon. He's a personal trainer in Pennsylvania, but he has written a tremendous book on supplements, and he's been pretty much neutral. He's not for or against, he's just listing. It's more like a, Cliff's Notes on it. And then a book that came out last year by Julie Joyce, who's a cancer survivor, Cancer Free 1, 2, 3. So they talk a lot about the nutrition issues in long-term cancer survivorship. I wanted to talk a little bit about technology because I have a couple of these websites here, Self-Nutrition Data. Actually, you put foods in there and they calculate, it's an app, and they calculate all of the information you need to know. The same thing with Nuval 1-100, basically scores different types of foods on a 1 to 100 scale. That the higher your score, the better the foods that you're eating. And some folks who know Mercola.com and Health Ranger, these people are involved with nutrition information every day. Some people are not too excited about Mercola. They think that he's a little one-sided, but I've gleaned a lot of information from his sites over the years. Is the FDA doing anything? Well, for those of you that know, they came out just recently with new food serving guidelines that they say are supposed to be more realistic than what people have been looking at. I know that they had a lot of press recently on all the morning shows about the new FDA guidelines. One thing I did add here is the American Medical Association still has not commented or gone pro or con on the use of hormones in commercial foods. And I think that in the future, the American Medical Association probably would want to take a stand on some of these things. So as I come to a close here with my last few slides, I think that some people are moving more towards vegan, and I think a lot of it is because maybe the price of meat. Recently there was a big health scare with pork over in Asia, and I think that pork futures and pork prices may be going up this summer. I think people are wanting to move away a little bit from corporate farming, as they see things on the internet, as they're inundated with more information. As I'd mentioned, home and rooftop gardening practices in urban settings is becoming more and more popular. People are buying more organic, they're demanding more organic, and then they want to look at some of the top websites for nutrition, and I've included a few at the end of the slide. So I stole something from one of my friend's Facebook posts, so don't tell Robin that I said anything. She works in a marketing firm that deals a lot with nutrition companies. And just a couple days ago, about 3 or 4 days ago, she posted this, that she was at a big meeting with some customer service teams and fast food companies and CEOs representing organic companies. And they covered the entire spectrum of nutrition. And basically her takeaway message was, the food awakening is on. Well, she's a marketing person, and if she sees that there's something happening in some of these big companies, I'm going to take her word for it. I like the fact that she posts these things, and other people post some of these things on Facebook, because I feel like we're all getting a little insider information here from some of her big meetings. So thank you, Robin. So in conclusion, I say that there might be 5 things in my mind's eye that we might need to think about in terms of a healthier way of eating. First is to reduce or eliminate processed foods. We all know that. The GMO issue is going to be a big one in the next few years. More of a self-reliance in terms of planting, gardening, and independent, whether it's a few pots in the backyard with herbs or it's a complete backyard garden. Look for proper supplementation that improves cellular function, protects against disease, and allows the body to function at a higher level. Trainers, coaches, health educators must take an active role in nutrition education. They should be the foundation of knowledge regarding this for the clients. And lastly, the consumer themselves needs to be a little more proactive in terms of portion size, the amount of foods they eat, et cetera, et cetera. They need to be their best health coach. And I know that there are 2 or 3 other people that spoke today that basically said the same thing. So did Bugs have it right all along? Carrot a day keeps the doc away? He probably did. So I've got a listing of some of these things. You don't have to copy them down. Let me know. Give me a card. I'll send you the presentation. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to have Rhonda come up here after an introduction from Heidi. Thanks.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, Eric. And so now we have time for a few questions, a couple questions. Yes, my friend. I can hear you.
Well, for me personally, I have a constant quest for knowledge, and I love to prove that somebody's a liar. I don't know what it is, something my parents taught me. And so I think that things you can do is to rely on events like this. This room should be filled because the people that spoke here today had valid knowledge, and they have impeccable reputations, and why people want to learn elsewhere is beyond me. So when it comes to the emails, I just tell people just don't ever forward them, ever. I believe that Snopes.com and trutherfiction.com is a really good source for anything, including nutrition information and medical information. But it's just know who is making the statement and where they're coming from. What's their perspective?
I'm going to make a little personal thing here. I actually do buy some nutrition products at a store in Southern California called Complete Nutrition. But before I bought those products, I ascertained that this is what I wanted, and then I went online and I looked at the ingredients, and I have a friend of mine who's a clinical dietitian and nutrition person, and I ran some of this stuff by her. So even though I think that I've known, I've been studying nutrition supplements for almost 30 years. I remember 1986 was the first time I went to a nutrition seminar. I still like to do my homework. I'm not going to take something, just look at protein supplements. A lot of what's happening, the protein supplement in and of itself might be good, but there have been some testing done to find that there are heavy metals in some of these national brands. Those are all listed on websites as well. So I make a decision based on, and I take a vegan protein, but I want to make sure that there's nothing on a website that says that there is a byproduct or there is a heavy metal. That's kind of the big thing with some of these. I want to make sure that that's about as high a quality as you can get. So I'll do my homework before I just buy a tub of the protein. So that's my answer to that question.
Excellent. Yes.
One of the things, you didn't mention it, but I've been reading the last week or 10 days, really fascinated with the amount of the drought going on in California. The amount of like 100 times more water per pound of beef than, say, a pound of watermelon. Do you have any?
When I was in graduate school at University of Michigan, we actually talked about how much water it takes to feed a cattle from infancy to, and it is literally hundreds of thousands of gallons versus how much water it would take. There's a drought in California? Really? I didn't know. But it is. It literally is, and it was a continuum of people who are vegetarians, and if you go to the veggie websites, they'll talk about that. Literally hundreds of thousands of gallons of water just to feed that one cow to produce enough beef for X number of people. And that same amount of water, if it were vegetables or fruits, could feed thousands of people. And I'm not an anti-beef guy. I'm just trying to point the facts out.
Yes, that's very true. Well, thank you so much. Let's all give them a round of applause. Thank you so much, Ron Bates.